Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we have a really focused mission. We're diving straight into the core, non-negotiable foundations of modern electronic music production.
That's right. We're talking about the stuff you absolutely need to know if you want to move beyond just, making loops and start crafting actual professional tracks.
The kind of tracks that sound polished on Spotify, but also, really hit hard on a club.
Exactly. And our sources for this are distilled right from some pretty intense technical masterclasses, all focused on that big tech house and sort of anthemic house music sound.
Yeah, the technical side can feel a bit daunting. You open up your DAW, your Ableton or Logic, and it's just this maze of jargon.
Compression, buses, sends, meters.
It's a lot. So our mission today is to give you a shortcut, to really arm you with the knowledge of just 4 essential concepts.
And these 4, they're the real difference makers. We're talking buses, parallel compression, LUFS, and sidechain.
Get these down, and you're closing that gap between a demo and a professional release.
We're going to give you the technical how-to, but more importantly, the why behind it all. The reason the pros do what they do.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with organization, right? A concept that often trips up beginners. The bus.
The humble, yet very powerful bus.
What exactly is a bus? And why do I even need to use one?
The easiest way to think about it comes from a great analogy in the source material. Think of a school bus.
A school bus, okay.
Yeah.
I like that. So instead of each track being its own car,
Where you're trying to process each one individually, like driving each kid to school separately.
you just group them all together.
Exactly. You take your kick, your clap, your hi-hats, all that percussion, and you route them to a single bus channel. Then you process that one channel.
And the benefits are huge, right? The
Yeah.
first one being just raw computer power,
Hmm.
CPU efficiency.
Absolutely. So if you have, say, 8 different percussion tracks and you want to compress them all,
I'm not loading up 8 different compressors.
you're loading up one on the bus. And believe me, when your project starts hitting 60, 80, even 100 tracks, those savings are not small. They become critical.
Okay, so it's efficient,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a sonic benefit too, right? You mentioned this idea of glue.
Yes, cohesion
Right.
or glue. This is probably the most important part.
So how does routing sounds together actually make them sound, better?
Well, when you apply the same compressor or the same reverb to a whole group of sounds, they start reacting together as a single unit.
So they're all responding to the same dynamic movements.
Precisely. Your drums stop sounding like a bunch of separate samples just layered on top of each other. They start to sound unified, like they were recorded in the same room at the same time.
Ah, okay.
Hmm.
So if I put a bit of reverb on my drum bus, suddenly my sharp metallic hi-hat and my sort of woody shaker sound like they're in the same physical space.
It anchors them together. It's the key to a professional mix. And the third benefit is just simple control, hierarchical control.
Meaning I can have buses inside of other buses.
You got it. You might have a hi-hat bus and a percussion bus, and then you route both of those into one big master drum bus.
So it's like a chain of command for your mix.
And now you have this huge complex drum section, but you can control the volume of the entire thing with just one fader. That's speed. That's control. In Tech House, that one drum bus is the absolute rhythmic heart of the track.
That makes perfect sense. So we've grouped our drums, they're glued together. Now we want them to sound massive, powerful, but still clean. And this, I think, brings us to the second concept, the one you said really separates the amateurs from the pros.
Parallel compression.
Parallel compression. Here's where it gets really interesting for me.
Because we're kind of trying to do 2 opposite things at once. We want to make the drums huge, but we also want to keep that initial punch, that transient.
Right. And normal compression usually kills that, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
If I slam a compressor on my drums, I lose that initial whack of the kick. It gets smoothed over.
It does. So the pros get around this by using a parallel signal flow. It's basically 2 paths for the sound.
2 paths.
Yeah.
Okay, break that down.
Path 1 is your original, completely untouched signal. The dry signal, it has all the natural dynamics, all that clarity, all the punch. You don't mess with it.
Okay, so that's my clean track. What happens in the second path?
In the second path, you take a copy of that signal, send it to a different channel, and you absolutely destroy it with compression.
You crush it.
Crush it. I mean, we're talking extreme settings. Fast attack, fast release. You're turning it into this dense, thick, sustained sonic sausage. That's your wet signal.
Huh. Okay, so I've got my punch and clarity track and my thick and heavy track.
Exactly. And the whole purpose of that crushed signal is just to add that body and that sustained power. Then you blend just a little bit of it back in with your original clean signal.
And the result?
The result is that your ear perceives the whole thing as being way louder and thicker, but because those original transients are still there in the dry track, it still sounds incredibly punchy and clear.
Wait, I have to ask about the setup. Am I just, like, duplicating the track in my DAW?
That is such a common beginner question, and a good one. No, the correct way is to use a send.
From my drum bus.
From your drum bus to what's called an auxiliary, or O, track. A send isn't copying the audio file, it's just creating a separate, clean stream of the signal.
And that keeps everything perfectly in time.
Perfectly, which is non-negotiable for punch.
Okay, let's talk numbers. What kind of extreme settings are we talking about on that O track?
The sources were pretty clear on this. We're talking very aggressive ratios, like 10-to-1, maybe even 20-to-1.
And the attack and release have to be super fast.
Super fast. And attack time under 5 milliseconds. The goal is total dynamic annihilation on that one channel.
And then the magic is in the blend. Maybe 60% of my original clean drum bus, and then I sneak in, say, 40% of this crushed signal.
That's the sweet spot. That's the technique. It's exactly why artists like Camel Fat or Fisher can have these drums that just feel enormous in a club, but they don't sound distorted or squashed. It's controlled power.
Okay, so now we have this huge, powerful drum sound. But if I make it that loud, aren't I just going to have problems when I try to upload it?
Yes.
How do we manage all that power for the outside world of streaming? And I guess this means we have to talk about LUFS.
We have to. For anyone putting music out there today, understanding LUFS isn't just a good idea, it's mandatory. We are way past just looking at peak meters.
So let's define it. What is LUFS, and how is it different from, say, an old RMS meter?
LUFS stands for Loudness Units Full Scale. Where RMS was kind of a simple average volume, LUFS is way more sophisticated. It measures perceived loudness over time.
How we actually hear it.
Right. It's modeled on human hearing, and it is the standard measurement that every single major streaming platform uses.
Which is critical because those platforms all automatically change your track's volume to hit their targets.
Exactly. This is the big lesson from the loudness war disaster. For years, producers would just crush their masters, pushing them to like -8 LUFS, thinking louder was always better.
And what happens if you do that now?
If you master your track to -8 LUFS, Spotify looks at that, sees you're 6 units louder than their target, and what do? They just turn your entire track down by 6 decibels.
So you sacrificed all your dynamics, maybe added distortion.
For literally 0 gain in loudness on the platform. The listener just hears a less dynamic track at the same volume as everything else. It's a waste.
Okay, so hitting the target is everything. What are the key numbers we need to remember?
The big one is Spotify, which aims for -14 LUFS integrated. Apple Music is a little quieter, targeting -16 LUFS integrated. YouTube is usually somewhere in between.
You said integrated LUFS. I've seen meters that show momentary and short-term too. What's the difference?
Great question. Momentary is the loudness right now, like in the last half second. Short term is the average over the last 3 seconds. Useful for checking if your chorus is louder than your verse.
But integrated is the one that matters for release.
Integrated is the big one. It's the average loudness of the entire track, from the very start to the very end. That's the number Spotify and the others look at.
So if Spotify is -14 and Apple is -16, what's the best practice? Where should we aim?
The consensus from the sources is pretty solid. Master your track to -14 LUFS integrated.
Okay.
That way, you won't get turned down by Spotify, the biggest platform. Apple Music will turn you down a tiny bit, but a gentle 2 dB of attenuation is much, much cleaner than the heavy limiting you'd need to do yourself to hit -8.
And what about the peak level? The absolute ceiling?
Never forget the true peak. The rule is to aim for a true peak of -0.3 BRB.
-0.3. Why that specific little bit of headroom?
Because when your high-quality WAV file gets converted into a compressed format for streaming, like an MP3, that encoding process can sometimes create tiny new peaks. That little -0.3 dB buffer ensures that even after conversion, your track won't clip. It's crucial.
That is fantastic practical advice. Okay, so we've covered structure with buses, dynamic power with parallel compression, and release standards with LUFS.
Oh.
Let's bring it back to the mix, back to the groove. Our final concept.
Sidechain compression.
The sound of modern dance music.
Without a doubt, it is the defining groove maker. And what's so cool here is we're using a compressor not to control volume in a boring way, but to create rhythmic space.
It's that sound of one thing ducking out of the way for another, and the classic example is the kick drum and the bass line.
The absolute classic. Every time that 4 on the floor kick hits, the bass gets quieter for a split second.
Which means the two biggest things in the low end aren't fighting for the same space at the same time.
And that separation creates that infectious, pumping feeling.
I'm still a bit fuzzy on the mechanism, though. If the compressor's on the bass track, how does it know when the kick is playing?
This is the magic of the sidechain function, or the key input. You put the compressor on the bass, because that's the sound you want to affect, but then you tell that compressor, hey, ignore the bass audio, I want you to listen to the signal coming from the kick drum track instead.
Ah, so the kick is like a silent trigger. It's not being processed, it's just telling the other compressor when to turn on and off.
Precisely. The bass is the audio passing through the compressor, but the kick is the brain telling it what to do. Perfect rhythmic sync.
The settings here must be everything. The timing has to be perfect to get the groove right. So what did the sources say? A high ratio, like 8-to-1?
Yep. And then a lightning fast attack, like 1 millisecond.
1 millisecond. Why so fast?
Because it has to be immediate. The bass needs to get out of the way before the main punch of the kick drum has even finished. Any slower, and they'll clash for a moment, and you'll get mud.
So the attack is just functional, get out of the way. The release time, though, that's where the groove is, right?
That is where the groove lives. A setting like 150 milliseconds is a great starting point. That controls how quickly the bass swells back up to full volume. Too fast, and it sounds choppy, but that 150 mirrors gives you that hypnotic, forward-moving pulse.
And the goal is to look at the gain reduction meter on that compressor and see it ducking down by about 6 to 10 decibels every time the kick hits.
That's the pocket. That deep, rhythmic movement is what makes a dance floor move. Without it, the low end just sounds flat, static.
Wow. We've covered a huge amount of ground. We started with buses for organization, then parallel compression for power, then LUFS for making sure that power translates, and finally sidechain for creating the groove.
And they're all connected. You can see how they build on each other. They're the keys to getting that professional quality, to making sure your track sounds cohesive and controlled, whether someone's hearing it on laptop speakers or a massive club system.
And it's worth remembering what the sources said. Every single pro track you love was mixed by someone who just put in the hours mastering these exact fundamentals. You now have the blueprints. You're on the path.
So, what does this all really mean for your next track? We've set up the fundamentals of grouping sounds, making them pump, and standardizing them for release. The next logical step, the real challenge, is applying all of this to the low end. It's one thing to know these techniques, it's another to use them to make your kick and bass hit hard on a giant system while still being clean and perfectly in phase. That's the critical challenge these foundations prepare you for. That's the mystery to solve next.